put together for transportation here locally. I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the finance program. Oh, I just touched the pad with my finger. Sorry. I will give you an overview of the current conditions from our inventory that we've done with some public input that we've heard so far. And then at the end, just make sure I get all of your input. So moving forward, so why do we need to adopt a transportation system plan? First, it is required by the state. The transportation planning rule says every city should have one. So you do, and we're going to update it. It serves as the transportation element in your comprehensive plan. You guys probably already know that. You know you have your comp plan, and transportation is a very important element of that. It also helps provide just a long-range direction for you. You know, where are we going to be spending money? What are our priorities, and how are we going to move forward? Oh, sorry.
How often are these done?
Most cities do it, depending on how fast they're growing, anywhere from a 5 to 10 year cycle. So, yeah, I think once you get around 10 years old, it's getting pretty stale. Things have changed a lot, and transportation's changed a lot.
When was our last one?
Oh, that is a good question. It's been probably since, oh gosh, you're going to have to ask me on top of my head, 08, I believe? 07, okay, yeah. So 10 years, look at that, it's perfect. So it's stale, it's time to put some new magic in it. So what must a transportation system plan do? So definitely we need to be consistent with state and regional plans. That's my responsibility to make sure everything we're doing is up to snuff with all the other agencies. We need to establish an efficient network for arterials and collectors. Also looking at sidewalks and bikeways linking to the various activity centers around the town. We also look at transit services to meet basic needs for your community. We will be defining standards for your public works department, street layouts, some spacing standards, and connectivity. And then at the very end, we need to have what we call a reasonable finance plan. We do not know in 20 years how much money we'll have to spend, but using our best thinking cap right now, how much do we have to spend and what can we do with it? Okay, so what should a TSP do? Beyond what we must do, there's some other great things that we like to incorporate into transportation plans. Definitely upholding community visions and the expectation for the future. And tonight we will go over some goals. We want to support a variety of travel choices. You know, that's kind of the hot buzzword in planning. Okay, it's changing on its own. I don't know why. Hold on. Oh, hold on. It's playing and I'll pause it and let me do it. Okay, sorry, technical difficulty. So we do want to be looking at not only motor vehicles, even though that is the predominant mode in town, but also making sure people that have a choice for transit or walking and biking as well. We want to make sure that all people in the community are served. We definitely want to promote safe travel. Safety is a very important piece of what we're doing. We want to support the local and state economy. We know that the transportation and the economy really work together. And also minimizing any impacts to natural and built environments. That's also a key piece for us. All right, so this is our schedule, and sorry it's very tiny. I'm hoping your copy is bigger. But you can see where we are right now. We started back in 2015, towards the end. We've been marching through these various tasks. To date, we have put together some draft goals. We've done all of our data collection and inventory. We've done all of our analysis of how the conditions are for the existing system. And then we've also taken a look at the existing financing and seeing, how much have you been spending in the past on transportation and how much do we think will be available in the future. So that's where we are right now, and that's that green line. The next step, we jump into the fun part. We start looking at the future and what the future needs are, and then we come up with some potential solutions. So that'll be the next piece. All right, so these are some common elements that are in a transportation system plan, and I'll go really fast. So we start with the goals that we're going to talk about tonight. That's that big circle in the middle. And then from each of those, there is a connecting plan. So we will be coming up with a motor vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle, and a transit plan. And then we do look at other modes briefly, and that can be things like waterways, so you don't have any navigable waters. We look at air, but just a little bit. Your airport has its own master plan that we will be reviewing and tying in a little bit, but we really have no control over the airport. It's its own thing. And then we'll be looking at if there's any code or policy changes that need to be made to uphold some decisions that we make with the transportation system plan, which really does affect City Council, that's something that we'll be looking to you guys at the end of this. And then also, as I said, financing. We'll be looking at money because we've got to make sure we can pay for everything. And then that little bar chart to the right just is a simple little diagram to show that we start with goals, and then what we do is we come up with some evaluation criteria, and that's how we decide how we want to prioritize projects. Because it will be difficult. You'll see in a minute. We aren't going to have a lot of money to spend. We'll likely come up with hundreds and hundreds of projects, and we'll be able to fund 10% of them. That's usually how this works. So how do we decide which 10% are the most important? Well, which ones uphold our goals the best? I mean, that's really where we start. So from the goals, we come up with some evaluation criteria that help us score the projects against the goals, and then at the end, we're going to have to identify and select which alternatives make the most sense for you guys locally. So these are our goals. There's 8. We've tried to keep them simple and succinct. You don't want 2, that's not enough. You don't want 20, that's just too many. So I'll read through these really quick. Goal 1, an equitable, balanced, and well-connected multimodal transportation system. 2, convenient facilities for pedestrians and bicycles. 3, transit service and amenities that encourage a higher level of ridership. 4, efficient travel to and through the city. Goal 5, safe and active residents. Goal 6, a sustainable transportation system. Goal 7, a transportation system that supports a prosperous and competitive economy. And 8, coordinating with local and state agencies and transportation plans. And I will say, we started with the 2000 TSP and also your 2004 comp plan. They both have goals within them. And you guys also had recently done a 2040 vision statement. So we tried to take all of those and then take all of the other kind of modern TSP goals that other communities like yours are doing. And from that, we came up with these 8 draft goals. So they're pretty representative of what, a 2017 TSP would look like, but fit for you. All right. So again, you might have to look in your packet. Those numbers are small. So in the finance program, what we do is we go back and look at the expenditures of the last 5 or 10 years. How much has the city really been spending? How much have you been getting in state funds? How much have you been getting in federal funds? And there's different revenue sources for you. There's the Surface Transportation Program from the state. There's a Highway Trust Fund. You do get some money from the state for walking and bikeways. The city collects system development charges, as you guys know. And then also just some miscellaneous grants and things that you've won. So we take all of that and assume an average. And then our transportation system plan update is going to be based on a year 2040 horizon year. So that's what we're planning for. So if we take those numbers and just assume things stay the same through 2040, we'd have almost $41 million to spend. So that's the good news. That sounds like a lot. But then when we start looking at expenditures, how much does it cost to maintain things? How much does it cost to operate the transportation system? When we look at how much you've been spending in the past and extrapolate that out to the year 2040, that comes up to almost $23 million. So my big takeaway from that is more than half of our future revenue stream is going to operations and maintenance. So it's kind of depressing to hear that. It's really expensive to maintain things. So that leaves us with that $18 million right now.
Is that a fairly typical?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's really hard. A lot of cities, and we'll get into the finance part in the next slide, but I think a lot of cities struggle with how do you pay for maintenance, because it's shocking how expensive it is you think, we'll just build everything and then it'll last forever, and it doesn't. I'm sure your public works could cry and tell you how hard it is just to keep the potholes out. So yeah, it's the reality. But yeah, it's where we're at. So one of the things I'll be coming to you in a year or so once we have our plan. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Have you added inflationary costs into some of those?
Yeah, these are escalated for 2040. Yeah.
Personnel as well as supplies and equipment.
So that's what that, when you look at materials and services under city expenditures, that's in there as well. So yeah, there's personnel services, and this comes straight from the city, which would be salaries and and things like that. And then materials and services would be all those other things. And then there's actually capital and the maintenance costs for all of those.
But you've added the inflationary factor to that.
Yes.
Through 2040.
Yeah. So in the future, I'm hoping we come up with these great projects and you love them all, and it will be really hard for you to, whittle it down to that 18 million that we are going to have. So, one of the things that you do have in your power is, well, let's talk about, are there things we could do to increase how much money we have to spend? And this is where the conversation's going in a lot of the smaller cities that I'm working with, is they're trying to decide, well, wow, it's really hard to pay for what the community wants, but, it's also difficult to ask people for money. So it's definitely a balance. So right now you do collect system development charges. Some cities are opting to increase those. The economy's picking up. They're thinking they don't have to be, as developer friendly maybe as they had to in the past. So that's just something to consider. Some cities are looking at a transportation utility fee. So while a system development charge is only for a new development, like if someone comes in with a development application, they pay for those new trips on the streets. A transportation utility fee is something that all residents pay, and it's based on how many trips you generate, and it comes on your utility bill. It's very low for like a single family. Most places it would be a couple dollars a month on your utility bill. It's a bigger when you get to more commercial uses, like a grocery store generates a lot of trips. Of course, like schools, every city has to decide, do they want to actually charge the school district? They typically don't for public uses like that. But depending on how that pans out, it can be a big generator, and a lot of cities are opting to do that and have 100% of that money just go to maintenance. That seems to be a little more palatable for the public, because they feel like, I don't want potholes, and if I can pay a couple dollars a month to fill them, that seems okay for them. And then what that does is that relieves the money that you are already going into maintenance. You can move to some capital projects if you want. There's other things like the local fuel tax. Some smaller cities feel like they get a lot of traffic going through their town, and they want to collect, on top of, if there's a county, and of course there's a state fuel tax, you can add 1 or 2 cents per gallon. That adds up a little bit. Also registration fees, though that's mostly something counties do. Cities don't do that as much. And then others are doing like levy taxes. That's not as popular either, but you can do a property tax to pay maybe for a specific package of projects if that was something that, the city and the community really wanted and you were trying to find a way to pay for it. So those are just some of the most popular options. Okay. So I wanted to give you a little overview of our current conditions for each of our walking, biking, transit, and driving conditions. And then please, I want to get some feedback from you guys too. So what we've heard what we found was overall the walking network is pretty good near downtown. Lots of sidewalks. They're in pretty good condition. But as you get towards, the peripheral area of the city, there's a lot more gaps. It's an older part of town. And then the sidewalks that we do have, some of them are in pretty poor condition. We reviewed the last 5 years of collision data at, I think, about 40 intersections in town, and then some of the segments along the highway as well. And we found that most crashes for pedestrians occurred downtown, especially along US 20 between Airport Road and Russell Drive, and then also near Airport Road at 2nd Street. And I would attribute that just to there's a lot more people walking in that area, so you're going to see a higher number of pedestrians involved in collisions. The majority of pedestrian collisions, about 71%, were caused by drivers failing to yield the right-of-way in a crosswalk or along a sidewalk. So that's something we will be looking at. That can be somewhat, enforcement can help with that, but also just driver education. People need to know the rules of the road, and it's just Oregon. If there's a pedestrian, especially in a crosswalk, you need to yield to them. So there may be something where we need to look at treatments, just clear crosswalk markings, maybe some signage in some of these locations. So we'll be looking at some solutions for those. And then from the public, what we heard was that green box there at the bottom. Sidewalk improvements are needed along streets with heavy pedestrian traffic. Highway 34 and Airport Road were both mentioned. Railroad crossings need pedestrian safety features, and I thought that was interesting. There's quite a few places, because you have a pretty active rail right here, where the sidewalks stop short and don't actually, connect, or there's no obvious area for a pedestrian to actually cross where the tracks are. So that's something that we'll look at too. There's some safety concerns for pedestrians at US 20 Main Street with Oak. That's that funny intersection downtown. I think that came up in a couple comments. So we'll look at that more in detail. Pedestrian crossings at offset intersections should be improved. And again, Main Street at Grant, and then US 20 at that Walker Road, Dewey Street, and 2nd Street, East Street, Milton. Too many names. So we'll, again, be looking at all those in details just to make sure. A lot of times if it's not a perfectly, four-legged intersection that's all nice and perpendicular, it can be hard for drivers to know where to expect pedestrians and where they're walking. So there may be some safety things we can do there too. And then also just areas near schools need better sidewalk connectivity, which whenever we do a TSP, we do concentrate on the schools and the library and those walking destinations and make those high priority locations for sidewalk infill. So that's something we'll be looking at too. Okay, so you guys aren't talking. When you think about walking and pedestrians, do you guys see anything? I mean, you live here. Are there any either specific locations or just overall? I mean, do you see like kids walking to school having a hard time? I don't know how often you guys walk or would walk if you could, if there were sidewalks.
One of the priorities that we just had to fill out for our goal setting session, and I have on mine, is wheelchair accessibility throughout the community, specifically near the downtown corridor area. For instance, my house, if you go to the corner, there's no curb cuts. You go all the way around the corner, there's a curb cut. Then you go across the street, and there's one on one corner, but not on two other corners. And I've had a lot of people come to me, since I am in a wheelchair, telling me the same kinds of things. We had a lady was on Park near Sherman, where it's very rough, and she actually fell out of her wheelchair there because of the roughness of the sidewalk. So there's some real issues near downtown, and that's a big concern of mine.
Okay, well that's very good. I would say we will be looking at some ADA ramp and ADA issues, but doing a citywide inventory is not part of this. But what we've been doing for other smaller towns is actually putting a project into the transportation plan to fund a citywide, it's called an ADA transition plan, and it identifies every deficiency for ADA ramps and crossings within the entire city and then helps prioritize those. And then once that study can get done, that puts you in a really good position to go out and get some funding. There's a lot of state funding that's available and federal to then help and go out and get some physical improvements done for those.
Is that going to be in our plan?
Well, no. So the our plan will have it's like a $20,000 or $30,000 study to do the plan that gets into the detail. But yeah, if that's something that I'm hearing from you guys, then we'll definitely make that just a high priority project to do the plan.
Especially as we're promoting downtown and walking and strollers and wheelchairs and bikes. It would be a lot nicer to have safer sidewalks. I mean, especially the couple of blocks either side of downtown, I think is really critical.
Yeah, and we don't even just look at the ramps. That study also looks at, are there any like power poles?
Mm-hmm, yes.
I'm sure, I mean, anyone here, but lots of times they're right in the middle.
And there's a power pole right in the middle. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's also just through pit width for ADA as well. So, all right, thanks. Good comment. Anyone else?
There's two areas that I observe pretty frequent. It's prior to school starting in the morning and then after school lets out. Mm-hmm. And that's 5th and Airport and 7th and Airport. There's quite a congestion of traffic, especially at 3:30 to 5. After athletic events, it's even worse. But a lot of decision making by pedestrians crossing because there is a high amount of traffic. And even though they've got a crossing, they will get out in the middle of it and then come back.
Oh.
Because
Okay.
they see maybe that somebody's not going to stop in the other lane. So those are two highly amount of traffic and pedestrians prior to school, after school, and athletic.
Okay.
The other one that I've had complaints on, and I've talked to Ron and the guys, I think it's 12th and Tangent. It's going to the school, or is it 5th and Tangent?
It's fifth.
5th and
Fifth
Tangent,
and Tangent.
where they said, oh yeah, we'll be fine, we don't need it, and it's bad, and I get a lot of complaints from that area.
That it's hard for pedestrians
The
to cross?
kids going to school, yeah, it's a
Okay.
major
I can
highway.
see it. And people not stopping.
Yeah, and people don't stop, and they go quite fast in that
And I
area,
think
so-
people not stopping is a real issue. I walk a lot around town, and I imagine it is everywhere, but that would be a good conversation for enforcement, I think, I want to run stings. I'll do it. I'll stand on the corner. It makes me
In your
crazy.
Catwoman outfit.
Yeah.
You know,
It'll actually be lit this next year.
What's that?
Fifth and Tangent will actually be lit when the crosswalk.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Oh, what kind of?
I know we talked about it, I just haven't talked to you lately, so, okay. Thank you.
Push button crossing or, oh, okay.
Awesome.
I've got
another
a problem.
thing-
I've been talking with Ron and Jason on Walker Road, which it goes west onto Stoats Hill Road is where it ends up. And you get to 7th Street and you lose the yellow line and the bike path. And there's a lot of traffic on that road. It's pretty dangerous. I'd like to see it widened, and I think it could be. Of course, we got to come up with money
it's a
to
half
do
a
it. That's
street.
always the problem.
Yeah, it is a
But-
funky.
But we need attention in that area.
Okay, good. I mean, that's what I want, because we can drive and drive and drive around, but
Mhm.
you guys have to tell us all this local knowledge that you have. Go ahead.
Two concerns, one question and one concern. First, concern about access getting onto Airport Road from Stoats Hill, from 7th, from 5th, at certain times of the day, particularly in the evening, but it can be problematic in the morning also. You take your life in your hands
Yeah.
trying to turn left and get out of town because of all the input traffic coming into town. I'm not sure how frequently, where you need to put lights so that people would divert to those areas, but trying to go clear up to 2nd Street, come out that way is pretty inconvenient.
Sure.
That's a bit of a hike. The second thing that I would suggest, and this is the question, trying to interface with the school district with respect to where they would have their expectations that the youth would be walking to school in comparison to where the bus routes are configured, to make sure that we have proper lights and crosswalks and sidewalks available in those areas. Particularly, the thing that comes to mind is the sidewalk on Airport Road, ends there at the corner of the high school, and there's no more. But there may be a lot of expectations that kids would be walking up that way, and there's no sidewalk on either direction, or either side of the street, for the kids that may be coming from that area up to Cascades. And there may be other places like that in town. So I would suggest that we interface with them and try to put a crosshatch about where their walking expectations are versus where these needs are.
Sure. I would say we do have someone from the school district on our advisory committee that's sitting in on this project specifically. So we engage in them directly. And yeah, it was when we do an inventory of all the sidewalks, we do prioritize locations on arterials first and then collectors. Those are the high-speed areas where we really need to have, a full urban improvement to a roadway. And then, like I said before, we do give a lot of consideration to schools and like the library and community center, places where we know people are walking, and those go to the top of the list. I mean, kids walking are some of our most vulnerable population, so we really focus those to be our high priority projects. So you'll see that in the draft.
The other big one that we have is the north end of town by the hospital, Highway 20, and I know it's been addressed. I just don't know what is being done, but I get a lot of complaints on that. What are we going to do about traffic at the north end?
Well, there is a newer pedestrian crossing up there, right? It's not signalized, but it's marked.
Yeah, there's a pedestrian crossing, yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard feedback? Anyone of how's that's doing?
I never see anybody in it. Every time I go there, I never see anybody in it.
I see it a lot.
I see it
Oh,
all
do you?
the time.
Okay, maybe during
Yeah,
the
the
day.
students
All right.
going back and forth.
So you guys are seeing pretty good compliance, and
I love it.
Okay.
I still think they're probably, I don't know. To me, it seems like there needs to be a signal near Reeves or somewhere in that area.
Well, there likely would be because of the cars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something we'll be looking at for sure. Because we will look at, we forecast volumes for 2040 based on your land use projections and turn those into car trips, and then we look and see what you guys would need for that. So.
And I feel like the downtown coming in town this way, the lights start one block too late. Like because really the Legion crossways right there is very busy, and you cannot see cars. It's kind of just a leap of faith running across, because if cars are parked on both sides, you just kind of have to gauge and look in between cars and then go quick
There's
to get
blind
across
spots
there.
on both sides.
Yeah, that's
I got to agree with her.
Yeah.
It's a bad spot.
that. If just one block more of lights, if the lights started there, it would be a much safer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the state's not going to do that.
I had a question about speed zones. I'm just curious, as our city grows and as we expand, it seemed like our limits were set for where we were 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And now as the neighborhoods push out beyond into those speed zones, do those speed zones at the county or the
So
city?
speed zones are
those?
set by the state, and they are, okay, this is going to sound really technical and nerdy, sorry. They're set when you do a speed survey of the actual, travel speeds on the road. They'll look and see what's called the 85th percentile speed is. So that means 85% of the people are going that speed or slower, and then 15% are going that speed or higher. And then that is what they set the speed on to the nearest 5, and they can kind of use their discretion. And that's really just how comfortable people are driving. So even though it's set at 45 miles an hour, say, 10, 15 years ago, if that's becoming more urban, the neighborhoods are growing out that way, and because there's been sidewalks built and people start feeling like, oh, well, that's way too fast, I got to slow down. If traffic is naturally going maybe 35 miles an hour, then you just need that data and you just show it to the state, and you can apply to have the speed zone changed. But they won't do it just because you want it slower or because it's urban. You have to actually prove them that people are going that speed. Yeah, it's pretty strict. But you can always collect the data and then decide if you want to submit it or not.
Well, yeah.
It's
Who
pretty.
collects it? And
Well, there's tons of traffic vendors that can go out and do a count for $500. You just put tubes out in the road and you can collect it and make a decision. So good question. All right, everyone, you want to get to biking? And if you think of a walking thing, we can always come back, but I don't want to run out of time. So we found, significant segments of continuous bike lanes exist along Oregon 34, 5th Street, 2nd Street, Main Road, and Airport Road. So you guys have some good bike lanes in some of the busier roads. Most crashes involving bicycles occurred at intersections, again, caused by failure to yield to the right-of-way. And it was typically when cars are turning, and that's a hard one. When cars are making a right-hand turn, they are not looking behind them to see if there's a bike coming in that bike lane or just someone in the shared road. And that's really, a behavior that drivers learn over time. As more people are riding, you start getting used to looking for them and seeing them, and it becomes safer for them. I mean, I know in Portland it's changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years. There's so many bikes now that you can't forget that they're there. But in smaller communities where biking's not, as a popular mode, it is difficult. So we do see quite a bit of that here. The streets in downtown generate it says extreme levels of stress. So we did this a little analysis where we look at the roadway widths, the volumes, the speeds, and we did find, based on those characteristics, there are some roads downtown that we would consider to be very stressful for bicycles. Sorry, I'll talk loud. One thing that we will be looking at is, hold on. I'm sure you're used to it.
Not louder than the diesel.
I don't want to yell. We will be looking to see if there are some, we call them low stress, so low volume and low speed parallel routes, just a block or two off the highway where we could just direct bicycles to ride. And that works really well in a lot of cities, so that's something we'll be looking at, giving them a safe place to be and not have to ride on the highway. So some public comments we received were they want bike connections to schools are needed. I think they'd like to see more kids being able, if not being able to walk, if it's a little bit too far, to be able to ride their bike, especially to high school. Those kids should be able to ride their bikes. And then also narrower and slower roads are desired to increase safety and encourage more trips bicycle. So again, that's something that we'll be looking at because you have a pretty nice grid. City's pretty flat. You have a lot of low volume, low speed, quiet roads. That would be a great place to ride. They're just not marked. They're not signed, and I don't think bicyclists just know to use them. So, no, not everyone. So that's something we'll look at. So do you guys have any comments just specifically for bikes beyond that?
Is there anybody? Is there anybody from the Lebanon Trails on this group, or have they been talked to at all as far as?
No, they're not on our advisory committee.
Okay.
Sorry. But I know we do have a couple biking advocates on our advisory committee.
Because they're kind of, a lot of those people are on the actual BLT. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And bicyclists on sidewalks is strictly an enforcement issue.
Yeah, that's an enforcement issue. It is frowned.
Tremendous amount of
It's a
that.
big problem, I see
Yeah.
bicyclists cutting in and out and coming down the sidewalk and
Yeah.
trying to beat the car to the intersection.
Yeah, that's very bad behavior.
It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely that's an education issue, right? I mean, it's something that, even when kids are little, you need to teach them how to ride a bike appropriately. And then it's also enforcement, too. You can give tickets for riding on the sidewalk. And we do see, possibly once we start giving them a place to be, that kind of helps, too. Because you're right, they're just trying to get through town. They don't always know where to be. If there's no bike lanes, it's tough. And I will say, it's just like driving. There are a couple bad bike riders that make it, make all bike riders look bad, and it happens with driving.
Most of what I see are the young people, not educated bike riders. If they want to jump the curbs, and pop up on the next one, and it's a fun game with them. And
Yeah, that's scary, but yeah.
I see an awful lot that aren't the young kids.
do you?
Yes. They give bike riders a bad name.
I know.
I do, yeah.
Wow. Okay, transit. And I will add, after we started this TSP update, the city was funded a separate study to do a transit development plan, which allows a little more in-depth transit planning than a normal TSP would do. So ODOT has awarded a separate project for that, and I'm overseeing it, but it's another consulting firm that's doing that, specializes just in transit planning. So we are integrated with them, and once their findings come out, we will be putting them and folding them into our TSP. But so we will be getting a little more in-depth in transit. We've been working with Kendra Oliver, if you guys know her, at the city, and getting some really good feedback from her, and they're interested in having a local route, something that might even start soon, within the year or even in sooner. Oh, well, the community and Kendra and a lot of the transit riders,
With our bus
people,
system?
yeah, your bus system, yeah, that's right, are interested in that. So that's something that they're looking at, but of course that takes time and money and
We
operations
talked about
too.
it
So
in council.
yeah, I assume you guys know about this, but I just want to make sure it's all tied together. So okay. So bus stops in Lebanon are located near US 20, and then there's also one at Weldwood Drive, Rural Boulevard. I guess I don't have to read all these to you guys, but Main Street, US 20, and then Oak Street, and then US 20 down in Industrial Way. The only bus stop near US 20 and Industrial Way, oh yeah, that one. It's signed and it provides a shelter, and then a shelter and a bus pullout. I guess what that's getting at, and maybe it's the next one, most of your bus stops are unsigned and don't have any amenities. So that's something I know we're going to be working on. We had a hard time just inventorying them and finding them and taking a picture of them. And if we can't find them, then most people probably are having a really hard time catching the bus. And I would say transit amenities are very low-cost things that we can do that make a big difference. So that's something we'll be looking at. And then most transit users in the city are more than a half mile from a bus stop. Yeah, so we do a little thing where we take a big half-mile circle around all the stops and see where that lands. Typically, a half a mile is how far people are willing to walk to get the bus. Further than that, not usually. And a lot of people do live outside that half-mile buffer. So I think that's one of the things. If they end up doing some sort of loop in a local route, we can get a lot more people that are closer to transit if they'd like to take it.
Question related to, I have a friend that works for the Chariots.
Oh, in Salem?
Are other larger transient things moving out into the rural for service? Like, I believe they go to Dallas.
Oh, yeah, if there is enough demand to make it pencil out. I mean, that's really the hard thing is you can't, have a bus service that goes up and picks up two old ladies. You got to make sure that it makes sense. But if there is enough either, jobs out there or a bedroom community kind of thing going on, yeah, that works really well. I mean, I know Portland's TriMet goes all the way out to Scappoose, and it's pretty far. That's just one route, but they do it because there's enough of demand for it. And yeah, I know Chariots does it.
I guess the employees at the casino, they use it at a high rate.
Do they? Yeah. So I mean, if there's enough of a driver for it, I think if they can ever make things work financially. In most cities, the rural ends up being like a dial-a-ride kind of a service, or it's even just volunteers that run something that's pretty small and basic. Oh, yeah. All right. And the only comment we got for transit from the public was someone had said extend bus service west of US 20. So, again, that's something we'll be looking at, extending the service. All right, driving. And I'll go fast. I'm supposed to be done in 5 minutes. Sorry. More than 60% of the workers in Lebanon live in another city located more than 10 miles away. That's pretty big. And creating mini-long commute trips and encouraging travel by motor vehicle. I mean, you guys know that. You're probably not surprised to hear that. But you definitely, have that mix where a lot of people don't live and work here. So a lot of people are commuting pretty far out of town. Dang it. Sorry, I'm just fighting with this tonight. Lebanon experiences an average of around 150 crashes a year, though the severity of most of those are generally low. 84% of them were only property damage or a minor injury. So that's pretty typical of a city this size in the type of travel volumes that you guys experience. 9 intersections in Lebanon were noted as having a high crash rate, and 3 of them had both high crash frequency and severity. So we will be looking at detail in those locations to figure out what the contributing factors are and if there's any design options that we have to improve those.
What were the 3 top ones?
I knew you were going to ask me. Sorry, I do not have it in front of me. I should have written them down. I tried to keep this as succinct as possible, but I can let you know.
I was just curious.
Yeah, no, we have them all in our memo that these come from. And then we did look at almost 40 what we call our study intersections, and all of them work during all of them meet operating standards in the summer peak hour. So as of current conditions, all of your intersections have congestion that is below the threshold. I know since we've already started looking at it, in the future that's not the case. Once you guys look at year 2040 and have your land use growth, we do see quite a few capacity issues. So some key themes from the public. People commented about peak congestion at US 20 and Airport Road. Traffic at US 20 Walker Road, Dewey Street backs up and impacts the main road Walker Road intersection. 12th Street is used as a bypass route for Denny Road and US 34, Oregon 34. You guys probably know that. Walnut Street and Ash Street are used by drivers to avoid traffic signals along Grant. Yeah, you have a lot of crafty driving in this town. And improvements are needed at Crowfoot, Central, and Cascade Drive intersection. So that is something, we're also looking at is why are drivers, avoiding certain routes? Why are they picking, everyone wants to get the quickest way possible they can when they're driving. So that's something that we'll be looking at too. The comments on congestion, I will say, when I said before that all of your intersections meet, what we call our performance or our mobility standards, they do, but we look at a full hour. And that doesn't mean that you may not have pretty congested conditions for 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. But when you average them over an hour and then we look at the standard, they work fine. So I don't want to discount anyone saying that, oh, I drive and it's horrible here. It probably is for 15 minutes or so, or half an hour. That's typically what happens in small towns. Okay.
Nothing like Portland.
Well, no, and it's all perspective too. And Portland's nothing like, Manhattan. So, so for driving, is there anything you guys want to ask or comment on in our last couple minutes? Not at all? Okay. Oh, sorry. I forgot this was in here. Other users. So real quick, there's 5 bridges that were flagged as structurally deficient. So we'll be looking at those. And 1 bridge was flagged as functionally obsolete. Let's see that you guys have some freight routes going through town, and we will be looking at those. The city has, this is a big thing actually. The city has a truck route on Wheeler Street, also Williams, Milton, Grant, and Oak. And we're thinking that might be something that's from pretty far in the past when trucks couldn't, either trucks, you guys didn't want trucks downtown, or we were trying to maybe avoid a turning curve at one point because it can be difficult for trucks to make turns. But we have had quite a few comments that current route is not appropriate. It goes through a residential neighborhood, and it shouldn't be signed as a truck route. So that's something we are going to look at and see if we have an alternative, and if the city is interested in putting the trucks back on the highway and not having that be the truck route. So that's something that we'll talk about. And the last one, the airport has almost 10,000 takeoffs and landings a year. That's a lot. It's a pretty busy airport. So other than that, you guys have any other questions for me?
I was just trying to think of the streets, and you actually have it here in green because I've had some complaints on Wheeler and Milton. So
yeah, it's funny when
good.
we saw it mapped, we thought, why is that a truck route? And then
and they just go right down there, and then they get stuck because they can't turn around with a big truck.
Oh.
Log trucks off of Main Street.
Yeah, I'm sure. But, there's not as many logging trucks anymore, and things have changed. So that is something, that we'll be talking to people about, if it makes sense to keep it or if we should do something different. Okay, is that it, you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Good job.
Oh, yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. You will see me again.
Okay.
Good information.
Yeah, so keep your packets. Please, if you have any comments, put them on the website, on the map. Tell everyone about it. I'd love to get someone using it. We had a big jump at the beginning, and now it just sits and no one puts any comments anymore. So.
Okay, we'll adjourn for 15 minutes and come back for our regular schedule.